Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our 5 panelists here. And I want to just start by asking each of you to give a brief sort of 30 to 60 second elevator pitch, and we're going to enforce this time limit for your company and what you're doing. So we'll just go right down the line.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm Kanejiya, founder and CEO of Cognii. So Cognii brings the power of artificial intelligence technology to the education industry, one of the sectors that has traditionally not received latest and greatest of the technologies. Our technology provides virtual learning assistant that is similar to Siri, but for education and learning purposes. Instead of asking a question and answering students' questions, we ask students a question, they answer, we automatically evaluate, and then provide feedback and tutoring support so they can master the topics.
Great, that came in just under a minute. Thank you for experience. Karen.
Kathy.
Kathy, sorry.
Kathy. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Hope all is well. Hi, I'm Kathy, CEO of EruditeAI, and we enable sales productivity for enterprise SaaS companies. I'm based in the Silicon Valley, and how we do that is that we build NLP to capture knowledge of employees, specifically for sales teams and across all cross-functional teams. We build machine learning algorithms to help sales reps find the right expert and the right content at the right time. And then once we do make those matches, we build NLG, natural language generation, to help support conversations. Why? To make knowledge transfer faster, cheaper, and smarter.
Amazing job staying under the time.
My pleasure.
Good morning. My name is Jack Kokko. I'm the founder and CEO of AlphaSense. We provide an intelligence search engine for financial analysts and other business professionals across 700 investment firms, banks, and corporations. And they're using our product to find critical data points that are buried in thousands of previously disparate content sources that we've aggregated together, providing a single access point and intelligence search, alerting, and just the ability to quickly discover information, just make smarter decisions faster and more confidently.
Hey, my name is Dennis. I'm the CEO and founder of x.ai, and we are hyper-focused. So we spent the last 4 years building these intelligent agents that can schedule meetings, so that when you send me an email saying, Dennis, I'm going to be in downtown Manhattan, do you got time for a Diet Coke? I can reply back and say, sure, I'm up for that. I've CC'd in my assistant, Amy, and she can help put something on my calendar. Amy is this agent that exists on email only. She'll remove me from the conversation, reach out to you, have this very human-like back and forth, where she tries to negotiate something that aligns to my preferences, that gets you on 200 Broadway, December 10th, 11 a.m., for half an hour for a Diet Coke. That sounds super simple, certainly, to understand, but it took 150 people to this point for where we think we're in okay shape.
Thanks. And I'm Nick Culbertson, co-founder and CEO of Protenus. We're a health data startup that uses medical records to identify privacy violations or data breaches throughout hospital systems.
That was so short. I love it. Nick is now my favorite entrepreneur. So when I was preparing for this panel, I took a look at some data from CB Insights, who have compiled a bunch of acquisition data about AI-focused startups. And they found that since 2012, there have been over 250 acquisitions of AI-focused startups, with 37 of those coming in Q1 of this year alone. So my first question for all of you is, what's taken you so long? Why are you independent? Why are you not working for Watson or Google or one of these other companies? What is the advantage of being a small company in this space? Relatively small.
I'll take that one. So I've been probably not competent enough, but lucky enough to have 2 prior exits. So the apartment is paid for, I got a nice laptop, I got some Diet Cokes in the fridge. So this one is a keeper. So whenever they come, I try really hard to say no thank you. And I think we have a really good hand here, as in I just can't imagine any upcoming AI for where any question I have will have the answer. Any job which I can imagine, it can do that job. What I can imagine, though, is some highly specialized AIs that can do one job, and that one job really well. And you know what? Somehow Dropbox turned into a $10 billion company saving files in the cloud. I just want to be that dude who schedule meetings at a $10 billion valuation.
I will say that I have actually tried, I was an early tester of Amy, and for those of you who haven't experienced this, scheduling a meeting with someone, it is a bizarrely, it is very close to Turing test level. I mean, I ended up having to stop using it because it actually took me longer to schedule meetings because people would be so curious about how this thing worked that they would ask me, and I would get into these long back and forth chains about how do I get access to this and what does it do when it has a conflict. So it actually ended up being more cumbersome to schedule meetings because people were so interested in the product. So I guess congratulations. Anyone else want to talk about being a smaller company in this space?
Yeah, I can add on to that. So I don't think any of us startups are against having strategic partnerships, right? We want to make sure that we're working with the right integration platforms, the right companies who can help us scale, right? That's the goal of a startup. But right now, we have 6 people in our company at Erudite. What is the advantage of that? It allows us to be nimble. Why is that very important for AI right now? It's because we find that our customers don't really know exactly what they want. I heard in the last panel someone say that they go and train CEOs on what AI and AI isn't. I also have to go in and talk to my customers about what our AI can do for them and what it can't do. I'll give you an example. When we first started building our technology, I thought that this was going to be an idea that would help disrupt the talent space. How can we improve talent retention through knowledge transfer? Selling into HR is a cost center, so that was a problem, but companies still dug it. They were like, this is great. Oh, but we don't have money. Okay, well, let's now really focus on what our product does. At the end of the day, it's an employee productivity tool. We get you the right things, the right information you need at the right time. Where would I sell into? IT, still a cost center. I'm still working, by the way, with my exact same pipeline, same decision makers. That tells me as a startup, companies want AI, but they don't exactly know how to use it. Now who am I talking to? The sales team. Why does that benefit me? I've all of a sudden moved my product from a cost center to a revenue center, and now I'm adding the most value to my customers. If I was partnering with a large company, I would have shackles. So that would really inhibit me from doing the customer discovery I need to do as an AI company.
Do any of you have a number in your head of a price for which you would sell? Is that how these companies work? Because I imagine you have a number above which you're going to take the money, retire to the island, and be happy. Or is that just not how you think about this? Yes.
I think it's too early for many of the sectors, and the opportunities is immense. So probably the first priority for entrepreneurs is to maximize the value that they are creating, and then worry about the acquisition pricing a little bit later.
It's the wrong thing to be thinking about. And, to kind of echo what was said before, I don't see any disadvantages to being smaller. We have over 100 people after 6 years. I've never been as excited about what we're doing just because now we've got some resources, we've got funding, we've got people, we can get a lot of things done. We've got a massive market that seems to be just growing every year as we prove that we can attack another layer in the market. And my story is I was actually a financial analyst myself early in my career, and I feel like I'm fixing the problem that I had nights and weekends working as a banking analyst, and so it's a personal mission to get this to everybody's hands. So I wouldn't give that up, not easily.
I know a lot of first and second year investment bank analysts who will thank you if this comes to fruition. Maybe their 100-hour weeks become 60-hour weeks. Nick, how do you think about this?
I was just going to say, if I could summarize everything's been said here so far into the last conversation, one of the advantages of being a small company is the laser focus onto a very specific problem. And so rather than thinking about it as how do I get to that point of being acquired or selling, it's how do I solve that problem? And I think that focus is also what allows the talent shift to become a lot easier for a smaller company like us, because a lot of data scientists, data engineers from large organizations want to go to an organization where they're focused on one project that they can own, see to fruition, and really benefit from that instead of being passed around from different projects in different spaces. So,
well, let's talk about talent for a minute, because I think this is an issue for a lot of companies in this space when you're competing with the big strategic acquirers who can pay
recruiting data scientists, engineers, if you really have something that's going on that's exciting, that's what they're drawn towards is the project. And if you have a reasonable compensation package and a reasonable company culture built around that can supply and fuel their excitement for the projects, then that's really what's going to pull them in.
And I think there might be this perhaps misunderstanding that the very first guy you need to hire need to be some PhD out of Columbia that spent the last 8 years working on some sort of NLU type set of research. But if I just look at our team, about 100 does nothing but data labeling. So any problem which you're trying to solve, you need to figure out, how do I define this universe in which I exist and define it in full? And once I've defined that, what data do I need to put in place so I can make predictions within it at high accuracy? And getting that team in place and that definition doesn't really require a pool of PhDs. That's some sort of willingness to go invest in you mining for data. Once you have some data, then you might go out and figure out how to get a dozen data scientists in place to kind of extract value from that. But I'm not so sure that that is the kind of barrier to entry. I think it's much more about figuring out where do you get that data from and how do you label that at very high accuracy, and then perhaps take a trip up to Columbia and pick up some guys.
You know,
Or women.
I think for us, the talent acquisition has definitely been a pain point. And what we have found worked, I really like what you said about what's the problem you're trying to solve and how do you engage the right people who are interested in that same problem. So we found that this idea of knowledge capture and transfer has been very interesting to our staff. But I also want to hit home on the fact that there's a research component to what all AI companies are doing. It's not just engineers sitting on their hamster wheel chugging out code. That's not how it works. And so it's really important, I think, to have opportunities for your AI engineers to be able to publish, to be able to work on the research. We have partnerships with McGill and Concordia University in Montreal, and I'm a Berkeley grad and have been working with the AI folks there. And what's nice about that is that it allows us to really capture AI as an emerging technology and help define what's around that corner for our customers. And at the same time, our talent knows, hey, I am delivering this product for customer value. I do have my stakes in this company. And by the way, I can now research how we can make our NLP language agnostic, which is great for us, and also it gets their name on papers, which works for them too.
Yeah, just to add that, I think there are a couple of factors that are very much favorable for people to join startups. We receive a lot of resumes from people working at large companies like Google or Microsoft or Amazon. And the common thing among them is that they would love to follow their passion of certain sector, whether it is healthcare or education or certain other sectors, where they would like to use their talent in a more meaningful way that makes sense to them, rather than trying to be responsible for improving a particular feature by 2%. And so that's one reason why they would like to be joining startups. And then certainly there's more ownership of the product development, management, as well as ownership in the company. That is very lucrative.
What I might add also is that it's about self-selection. You want to draw the people that are excited about the impact they can have in a small company rather than being part of a big pool of engineers at a big one. They're attracted to the equity, the sort of solving this business problem. And we'll take a pass on anybody that quotes their big salary offers from those big companies. Those are just not the right people. It's sort of you get this mercenary feel from some of them. And the other thing that's been helpful is just having engineering talent offshore, not competing on the home turf of Google's and Facebook's, but our engineering team is in Helsinki, Finland. We're drawing people from Russia, from all over Europe. And you can get PhDs in machine learning that are extremely capable at a lower price point for sure, and you can actually keep them long term.
A lot of the discussion around AI in the corporate world and in the media has been about these sort of general AI projects, DeepMind and TensorFlow and Watson. A friend of mine has said, tried to correct this by saying, well, most AI companies are not building Skynet, they're building washing machines. They're building single purpose, single task instances of AI. Have you found it difficult to sort of beat back some of the expectations and hype around this in conversations with customers or with fundraising, with venture capitalists or other people that you come into contact with?
Yeah, from our perspective, we have to always tell our customers or people recruiting, what we build is not magic. In fact, I was talking to Pavan about this earlier, that in terms of marketing, AI can come across as we boil the ocean, we do all these different things. But one thing I've learned, at least working in healthcare, is when we think about how to deploy our product, it's actually going around the health system and looking for highlighters. These are people who are highly skilled people who are taking a highlighter and highlighting lines on pieces of paper, a very repetitive task, using their expertise in a very repetitive way to solve this problem. And that's where we can come in and again be very laser focused and use AI to be more efficient in what they're doing and allow them to become the subject matter experts off of that intelligence. But it's very laser focused. It's very incremental in the addition of their workflow and not just this magical tool that says, hey, here's the solution to all your problems.
Well, and Dennis, I imagine you get this too because you have a personified AI. Amy, people must ask you, well, can Amy, set me up with dates or, do my taxes for me or something like that?
Or do people ask Amy out on dates, don't they?
So we see this all the time, which I think is less about AI and perhaps just the sad state of affairs on my agenda, which is how desperate do you need to be for where we're about to arrange a meeting for next week and you say, we should get drinks. No, we fucking shouldn't. I say, like, where did that come from? So I think you have a good observation, though, which is that there's a shift in the UI paradigm that allows for people to think more freely. So if I were in some sort of graphical user interface for where I go install Photoshop, the features are visible, as in, when I get to the end of that list of buttons, that is what Photoshop can do for me. And I might not understand all of them, but I know these are the options. In the kind of conversational UI, what you have is just the ability to write back really anything you want. You have to then imagine that this agent might have a set of constraints, meaning that if you write back to Amy, hey, I think Chelsea Football Club's going to win the Premier League this week, she needs to kind of figure out that probably doesn't really matter too much in regards to the meeting, and I can disregard it. But they still imagine somehow a response. And it doesn't help that the Apples and the likes have built in these gimmicks, which they've used in their kind of marketing campaign for where you can ask certain things to their agents, and that kind of carries over suddenly to our universe.
Alexa, tell me a joke. Or,
all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
And for us to be able to kind of solve this, given that language is not, from an academic point of view, a solved problem, we need to be super tight about what we can and cannot do. So when you say something which is outside of our universe, I can disregard it. But we still get it all the time. And I thought it would be so easy to educate the customer. But we have this other challenge, which is that the ones that we interact with the least are our paying customers. So our paying customers hand over the job to Amy, then we spend all our time with their guests who never read anything about Amy. They're really just there to set up a meeting. So we're having to kind of educate this unknown entity. And that I thought would be a whole lot easier than it turned out to be.
Well, and some of you are not working predominantly with other technology companies. You're working with educators or HR departments and talent acquisition specialists or finance firms that don't maybe necessarily deal in this kind of thing every day. How do you bring the proper body of knowledge to bear in these conversations without overwhelming people with sort of futuristic visions of AI?
There's definitely this thinking sometimes that AI is sort of this magic black box that can do a lot of things that are undefined, and it helps to explain kind of these are the tasks that we do with AI. This is where it actually helps. It helps to map together millions of terms into core concepts so that our search engine understands language that you're typing in. You don't have to know all the possible variations of language to run hundreds of searches, just run one, and our system understands it. That's what the AI does. Or it goes and recognizes thousands of companies based on patterns that it finds and understands. And so once you explain these sort of different layers of what AI is able to do, it's actually a series of single task problems that it's solving, and that's kind of where the light bulb goes off. I think that's really where the business value in AI really is. It's not there's even DeepMind. It's when you look at winning the game of Go. it's not a general AI solution. It's a very, very specialized and very difficult single task AI, very constrained by rules. So really, that's what everybody's working on is single task AI solutions. And you can have a series of them. You can even have them working together and reinforcing each other, but ultimately it's single task solutions. And once you explain that, people kind of start to get it.
So I have been tackling this problem by targeting enterprise SaaS companies in the Silicon Valley to start with. Why am I doing that? Because if you're not talking about AI in the Silicon Valley, you just have to leave the room. Everybody talks about it on the bus, on the train, on the streets. It kind of gets a little annoying. But why is this good for me? It's because we have an applied AI solution. I don't want to go in and have to educate my customers on what the AI does. Of course, I want to tell them about what we do, but I don't want to spend my time, I can't, I'm a small company, on why AI is valuable. I want to talk to them about why this application of AI is going to be impactful for you. So this has helped me with my own hyper-focus for the company to transition from HR now to sales. And for example, one of my potential customers is a Fortune 50 Silicon Valley company that already integrates AI into their own software products. They just do not have capacity to use AI as within their own business. So this makes sure that I reduce my customer education ramp-up time, increase my time to market, and also lowers my barrier to entry by focusing on customers who know AI already, might be building AI themselves for their own products, and just do not have the capacity themselves to bring AI to bear for their own productivity use.
Just to quickly add, we get this question all the time when we demo our product to teachers, that is AI going to replace me in future? And so the way we try to minimize that kind of fear is by saying that this is going to augment and demonstrating that in a small level of tasks, it is supporting them. But coming back to your original point about DeepMind's generalized AI research versus the specific things, I think there's a good synergy between those both kind of areas of research. A particular example would be speech recognition industry. DeepMind, I think, produced the very good neural acoustic model that transformed the generalized speech recognition accuracy. But at the same time, there were a lot of small companies that try to develop the linguistic data for each of the specific languages in the market in which they operate. And so the combination of this generalized algorithmic improvement with the specific niche in the particular segment, I think that works very well.
So let's talk about money, since we're at an M&A conference and we want to delve into some of these issues. You've all raised some amount of outside funding. How do you strike the right balance between getting enough money to fund your growth and not getting too much money? I guess that's a good problem to have, is too much money, but is there a danger of sort of taking on too much outside capital at too high a valuation too early in the process?
All about the details. On balance, you'd rather take more money than less. Usually the mistake entrepreneurs make is that they don't raise enough, and they just don't anticipate all the things that they need to do with more capital. Usually that's the solution, but to try to raise as much as you can with reasonable amount of dilution. Of course, the devil's in the details and what kind of terms that money is raised at, and if you raise too much, your investor might have the power to push you to spend it too fast before you're really ready, before you have that product market fit. Or you might have such a high liquidation preference or kind of a threshold that you'll have to have an absolute outsize event to be able to ever realize the value in your company. So there's certainly that risk, but if you consider those things, I'd definitely rather raise more than less.
I certainly think it's easier in a lean startup type setting to make predictions for how much I should value my venture and what it would look like in the next coming milestones, 12, 24, 36, 48 months into the future. In this perhaps anti-lean setting where you need to do years of kind of core R&D, we spent about 3 years before we started to kind of commercialize the R&D that we did. You need to make predictions so far into the future that it's just unlikely that you're going to be spot on. It's going to be above or below, but I certainly believe you have to somehow sign up for that with the risk that comes along with it, and then hopefully have a set of investors that are willing to somehow course correct slightly if you didn't kind of have that sixth sense to predict in 4 years, once we commercialize this R&D, we will know exactly what the value will be in market. So we've made that bet and tried to find those investors that had that kind of long perspective, and people that we worked with in the past, so that if we're not 100% spot on 4 years in, that they're willing to make that course correction. And that sounds very kind of soft, but that board meeting will not be course correction.
Nick or Dee or anyone else want to?
Someone told me early on when we first found the company that allow yourself to have options as you grow. And I'm thinking specifically of another company that we were colleagues with when we started our company. They actually did very well early on, took on a lot of capital, very high valuations, were kind of the show of our small entrepreneur community in Baltimore. But unfortunately what happened is they didn't see that commercial traction, and then suddenly their valuation was so high that their options were depleted in terms of what they could do and how they could look to take alternatives or pivot. And just by fortune of really good advisors, we stuck to more of a modest valuation and took very on modest levels of capital, and took a little more time to get to where we are now, and now feel like we do have a lot of options in terms of which direction we want to go.
Yeah, I think people can build the companies and try to scale it very quickly by raising a lot of capital, which might work in certain cases. But I think it's also very important to establish proof points and validation in terms of the real business model and traction. So being conservative is also good in certain cases.
I think for Erudite, it's a little too early to talk about it, but I used to work at a VC before coming to the company. And I would say when we were looking on the investor side at AI companies, when it comes to raising capital, the question is, raise capital for what, right? Raise how much capital for what? So it's really a case-by-case basis when it comes to these startups, right? Do you have the IP but not the talent? Well, actually, those two do go together. But you might have the IP, you might have the talent, but you may not have the traction yet. That's a different valuation. That's a different investment than if you have customer interest, you have a little bit of IP, and now you just have to raise some talent, right? So I think, for the folks in the room who are looking to invest in AI companies, to help others sell their AI companies to bigger firms and make that M&A happen, you really have to look at some of these components that create the valuation for the company. The talent, the IP, the longevity of the IP, who their customer pipeline is, and what the longevity of that revenue model is going to look like.
Now, Dennis, you mentioned wanting to become a $10 billion publicly traded company like Dropbox. The vast majority of AI startups will not go public. So given that most of these companies, if they end well, end in an acquisition, how do you know when the right time is to start thinking about that? How do you assess offers as they come in? What makes one acquirer look more compelling than another? And what do you think about the right time to have those conversations?
So here's the funny thing. I can, after they remove the curtains over the New York Stock Exchange, I can look into the trading floor from my kitchen window. So I see every single company that goes public, and all I really want is just go ring that bell. I don't really care about whether I make any money. It doesn't even matter. I just want to go over there, ring that bell, go home. Then I'm done. So that's all I'm hunting here.
They would probably let you do that. It was asked.
It doesn't count if there's not some sort of ticker symbol attached to it. So I've been over there touching it, but it didn't feel like it was real.
Send Amy over.
I just do believe that there's this moment in time, right, for where we can look at different paradigm shifts in the past, whether that is the beginning of the internet, the beginning of the mobile. I do think this is another paradigm shift for where if you started at the right moments with a reasonably intelligent backdrop, there is an opportunity for somebody to turn into that Dropbox. And you can come up with 100 reasons for why I'll die along the way, and you're right. But that's also a reason for anybody in here, or really any one of those 500 million users who needed to save a file in the cloud, if you ask them, did you do a meeting last week? They'll say yes. Why can't that be me? I agree, when we talk again in 3 years, I probably died, but I think it's a good hand, I'm playing it. And we're not for sale, that's what I said.
Mark his words.
Someone said earlier that I might be misquoting, but it's all about the team and the data and not the algorithms. And I'd say the other thing to that is, at least at a company like, at our stage, it's about the problem as well, the problem that you're solving. And I know we mentioned this already, but from our perspective, we are bringing together a large amount of data from hospital systems to solve a very discrete problem. We don't have the luxury of a large corporate organization that can solve multiple problems at the same time. We have to be laser focused. But the question for us becomes, as we solve that problem, is there a natural second or third or fourth problem that we can start to address, or just as Kathy mentioned, going from HR to sales, or that natural progression for a company? If not, then maybe it does make sense to use that data and give it over to an organization that can handle that kind of growth. But I think the biggest danger is spreading yourself too thin and trying to do too many things, as opposed to thinking about these very discrete problems.
So are you also not for sale?
So we just actually finished raising our Series A, focusing on the next step. I saw earlier that there's about $20 million you want to raise before the average AI company is acquired. So we haven't raised that much yet. So we have a little bit of growing to do.
Anyone else want to talk about acquisitions?
We're also building the $10 billion company that goes public, but just to answer the question of when you should think about it, I don't think you're in a bad spot if you have to be thinking about it. But there are those situations where you need to consider selling if you kind of see the end of the line in terms of not being able to raise money, or don't see the market opportunity, too much competition, or whatever the reason is. But otherwise, kind of the old advice, which I think is very valid, is that you're never looking to sell your company. You have to be building it, and you only consider selling if somebody else finds an interest in you and thinks that you're so valuable that even exceeds your view of the value. They're willing to pay you for several years of kind of value creation.
I've seen a lot of AI companies and think about selling in terms of an acqui-hire, right? So some AI companies have some really great IP, but there's scaling issues. I mean, we talked earlier in the panel about the talent and how that's very difficult to find, and yet you do go to these big companies and they have a sea of engineers and can pay them quite a bit. So, one thing to think about, and I admit I think about this a lot, is do I want to scale my company? Absolutely. And that said, are there strategic partners out there that we can strike an acqui-hire deal with so that there's the IP, we can grow our product together and make sense for us? We're a pure back-end solution to integrate into their platform to add value to that. For example, I talk to Salesforce quite a bit and a lot of mid-tier CRMs. How can we add value to your platform? I can leverage their marketing and sales team. They can leverage my IP and my engineering capacity, and together we make a nice, happy family.
So maybe for sale. That's what I'm hearing for you.
I would love to talk.
May not be for sale, but certainly open for strategic partnerships or business transactions. Sometimes that's a best step to start the relationship with. If you have real passion and see the value in the technology that a company has created, you could probably license it, use it for some time, or make a strategic investment, and then as the company tries to scale it, become an acquirer or potential acquirer.
So let's talk about this from the sort of acquirer or partnership side. Many of these companies that are acquiring AI companies are not themselves AI focused. They're strategic acquirers. They're doing something in healthcare or finance or something. How should these companies evaluate? Because there is a lot of hype out there. There are a lot of companies that are hyping their capabilities that are maybe a little bit of smoke and mirrors. So how should a company that is thinking about maybe acquiring a smaller AI-focused startup evaluate how far along they are in the progress and what the value of that company is. If it's not just the engineers, if there is something beyond that, how do you set a price for something like that? How do you evaluate whether or not to buy something like that?
Ideally, you wouldn't look at an AI company any different than anybody else. You'd just look at the business value that they're creating. You know, you'd look at the market validation. Are you solving a big problem in a market? Whether you're doing it with AI or something else, it should be a secondary consideration. Now, if you're acquiring a company much earlier, maybe as an acqui-hire or just you're looking for the technology, it gets a little bit harder. If you don't have that validation, then you've really got to be pretty savvy in evaluating what they really have. And then you just have to look at those kind of key ingredients, the data. Do they have enough of the right kind of data to really build and have algorithms learn? To have a differentiation. Why can't somebody else go and get the same data and just build those same algorithms? The algorithms rarely are the source of the differentiation. It's really in the data and the team. So those are the things that you'll have to go and evaluate, and you'll have to be pretty granular about looking at them. If you don't have the market validation, have to look at the problem. What is the problem that this AI company is solving? And is that even a good fit for AI? Is it something that you're basically trying to do things that people currently do that are very repetitive and need scaling, and you need lots and lots of people to scale those things, so an AI algorithm actually can do it much better. You teach it to do those repetitive things, and then you scale it to do it a million times really fast. Those are the right kinds of business problems typically that AI can solve. And so if you find that match of the right business problem, the right data, some differentiation, so somebody else can't just go and get the same data and then compete. And of course the team, then you've probably got something.
Last sort of topic, and then I want to take some questions. There's been a lot of talk recently from people inside the AI world about human-centered AI design. Fei-Fei Li, who's at Google and Stanford, has talked about the need for sort of more thought given to how we build humanity into AI products. I think her quote was something like, AI is the tool that makes the perfect chess move while the room is on fire. There's a sense that these problems are being solved in very small niches. Meanwhile, there are other problems that are bigger that are maybe not being addressed, problems around bias in hiring and talent retention. In the classroom, certainly, there are all kinds of human-centered problems. How do you all think about your responsibilities beyond solving a business case with your products?
One thing that we really want to think about here is this idea of human-in-the-loop AI, right? So when people ask me, well, Kathy, when your sales rep, your target user, the sales rep, has a question, why can't the AI answer? Well, we have a couple of reasons for that. Someone in the last panel said AI can't do several things, and the one thing it can't do is make value-based judgments, right? Respond with social emotional intelligence, right? So this is one way that I think we can mitigate that problem of bias with AI by making sure that the human stays in that loop. So instead of my AI responding to the sales rep with a very complex answer that the AI just can't do yet, right? Let's use AI to find the right person who can give that sales rep the case study she needs to close a deal. Let's use the AI to to help that other person then have a great conversation with each other. Give those humans prompts so that they can make sure that knowledge is transferred correctly. This is, I think, one thing that I see in AI companies. We have some competitors and they don't do this, and time and time again, and I'm in touch with them, they always come back and say the AI isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. And I feel like if we keep humans in the loop in this way, we can mitigate this problem quite a bit.
So we have this interesting setting, right, for where we've humanized our agents, not in a game of whether I can fool you into believing that it is a human, but they communicate on human levels. The thing that we've seen is that even programmatic empathy, if there's such a thing, actually works. So let's pick a simple example here. You and me are supposed to meet up next week, Tuesday. Somehow I think I'm busy. I reschedule to a little bit later in the day. I reschedule to Wednesday. I move it to the week thereafter. I moved from being kind of a nice to a little bit of an asshole very quickly in that kind of set of reschedules. What we've seen is that if we inject a level of empathy into that kind of progression from, Dennis, unfortunately, you have to reschedule this meeting, to, I'm so sorry, I apologize, but we have to move it to next week. Those aren't the words. But that idea, even when people know this is a machine, we increase the probability of keeping the meeting intact. Think about that. As in, you would otherwise have said, you know what, forget it, Dennis. But you know now that the machine somehow recognized the fact that this is unfortunate and cater to my emotions, and by that, I'm willing to keep the meeting. That, if you ask me, I just find absolutely fascinating, that somehow we've created a connect between machine and human here, where they're now willing to play along because of that connect.
And does Amy give anti-harassment lessons if someone asks her out on a date or says something inappropriate?
So we haven't done anything in regards to a typical type of penalty system, right? Which I think should exist, by the way, for where if you turn perhaps not overly rude or any one of the kind of obvious things you can say, we should just disregard that. That's typically the best way to just kill that. But I do think there's other places for where we actually do score people. So you might, I'm sure you're not, be overly tardy. So you always kind of reschedule half your meetings, you always run 10 minutes late. And remember, we know that. And if that is the case, why am I offering to meet up with you at 8 a.m.? Because it's very likely you might actually not be there. And if you're there, you're going to be late. So we're going to give you the 1 p.m. slot instead when you're supposed to meet up with Dennis. So we're certainly taking notice of how people act in this system, but haven't yet applied any kind of penalty type system for where your behavior is either directly penalized or rewarded.
Just one more comment and then we'll open it up for questions.
Just a quick comment. I think diversity of the data on which you train the AI is very important, because at the end of the day, artificial intelligence is trying to mimic human intelligence, and it's going to rely on some sources of input. And so, for example, the speech recognition industry, where the recognition rates were very high for US English at some point, and people from different countries or different dialects did not have good success in terms of getting recognized. But over the period of time, they amassed a lot of data and trained the system on diversity of data, and now it works very well.
Thank you. Questions? Questions for this group? Do we have a microphone that we're passing around? Or we can just... okay.
I have an easy one. How transparent should you be about telling end users when they're speaking to AI as opposed to a human?
I'll give you certainly the answer that we come up with so far, which is that we expose the fact that this is a machine. And again, I haven't seen any real value in playing a game of trying to hide that this is a machine. I've seen real value in telling it to our guests and hosts up front, but do the job so well that you kind of forget. I'll give you just another stat here. Even when we do tell people up front, and it's in her bloody signature, in 11% of all of the meetings we do, at least one of the email will have no other intent than gratitude. Meaning, somebody wrote Amy, thank you very much, or you have a nice weekend. Oh, so sorry for not having come back to you just yet. 11%, not 1 out of 400, 11%. Even me, I start all my emails with, Amy, would you be so kind? I'm thinking, how much time do I have in my life? But to kind of come back to your question, I actually do think you should expose it. And I think there is just a suboptimal setting for all of us if there's a set of people out there who try to kind of hide that, because I think we'll be worse off because of it.
Thank you. Can I address that too?
I just add to that, reinforcing the concept that's been stated over and over again, that AI is a tool and should be treated like any other tool. The challenge is that AI, if you have bias and the algorithm, it's scaling at large scale. And so without that level of transparency, you're not going to have that check of something really wrong is happening here. So I think it's really important to be transparent about that process.
Thank you. Another question? Yes.
Hi, I was curious, for your respective companies, did you figure out a problem you want to solve for and then decide we need AI to
we definitely started with a business problem, and actually we were first trying to solve it without AI in mind as necessarily the solution. When we started building this, you didn't really ever have deep learning coming to for like it is today as something that you can effectively use. What we were doing is building these hand coding algorithms that were employing thousands of rules to try to determine is a particular sentence in a document, is that positive or negative for a stock, or is this document about Apple the company or Apple the fruit. And what we learned quite quickly is that once you get into thousands of these kinds of rules, you are no longer effective. When you have to scale it to thousands to tens of thousands to millions, there are millions of private companies out there, so you have to build an algorithm to recognize all of them and disambiguate all of those issues. That's where you have to have AI, where it actually learns the rules itself. So I think that's actually the better way to start. You don't start with the technology looking for a solution. You start with the solution, and then you look at what are the available technologies. And then if AI is truly the right and the best solution, and you have the right algorithms, right training data, then you use AI. Then otherwise, might as well use something simpler.
I like even going one step further back, which is that you should latch on to pain or things you just hate. I have a long list of hate. I'm really a happy person, but a long list of things I just hate. And when we sold our last company, one of the very first things I did kind of post-acquisition was to go into my calendar to kind of see how many meetings did I do last year. And I did 1,019 meetings. 1,019. And any entrepreneur is just too frugal to hire really a personal assistant, or perhaps I'm just stupid. And I thought, 1,019. Then I looked at how many reschedules did I have? 672. What a bunch of fuckers. I spent so much time in setting up all those meetings, and now you go reschedule on me? What the hell? And I think if you go through that amount of pain, you want to at least take a look at, perhaps if I could remove that outside of just hiring some assistant at 65K a year plus overhead. So that was certainly the catalyst for us. And I countered that in December 2013, brought the team back together, and we set up shop, but not as an AI company, but to remove this particular pain. So one day I could be happy again.
And I'm really glad you brought up this idea of pain, right? When you're building a product, you always want to think about your product as a value add, a painkiller, somewhere in the middle. Because I think to your question of how you build that company, is it around the technology or is it around the actual user, this not only defines your company vision, your product vision, but also who your customers are going to be. So for us, for example, I also look at our product as that painkiller. And even in there, what are the nuances? Are you too Advil, call me in the morning, or are you a morphine? And what I found is that because we are a productivity tool for sales, we actually are a morphine to very large companies, globally distributed companies, diverse teams with lots of expertise lying around. Whereas, you can go into smaller companies and yes, they might sign a contract with you quicker, but the pain just isn't there. It's getting back to, that's cool, but I don't have enough of a headache to really want to deal with this. I'll take 2 Advil, but for this whole big shebang AI solution, not there yet. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it's about the customer too.
We have time for one more question. So, yeah.
I'm really glad the conversation landed here. I'm also a Canadian founder of an AI company. The emotion and pain and empathy is, I think, the frontier of AI. So the things like Kathy and Dennis really landed on. You can do a lot of things with machines, and frankly, a lot of the AI talent are on the autistic spectrum. They have a really hard time with emotional empathy, sitting down with people and talking about why. And so are you directly involving yourselves in the product management role, or how are you shaping the team to get that emotional lift on top of the engineering?
So I think, and I'm sure you would agree here, many founders are struggling to find that first VP of product, because the product is not really just a piece of software, it's your little baby, right? And you sit at night and kind of think about it. So we spent the first 3 years where me and my co-founder were kind of the de facto head of product. And I'm not saying that is optimal. I'm just saying that it's so hard to surrender that. And Ilya arrived, our new VP of product, which we brought over from Google 5 months ago. So that's 3 years, 2 months before we could start to kind of hand it over. And I'm still overly anal on any RFC and my little comments and this and that. But over time, I'm sure I can surrender that because there is no scaling without me kind of giving up on that. But I think once you've at least put in place a foundation so strong that everybody included outside of just the head of product can kind of push back. So we have a set of tenets on what we cannot do. Because I don't want to be another extension or app or plugin or doodle me or tumble me or whatever. I want to be this intelligent agent, and I want the whole team to latch onto that. And we might fail or die trying, but that's our bet. And I want them to push back on any VP of product who comes in. But I did hold on to it myself for years.
Thank you for all your questions, and thank you to our panelists.